I'm getting like a second chance to be like, live this thing the right way now. Like, enjoy these moments the right way and understand maybe your show gets on the air, maybe it doesn't. It's not about that. It's about these possible relationships you're going to make, this kind of new thing to look forward to each day. That's what life's about.
You ever have like a fucking insane 24 hours? I did a talk yesterday morning, then I flew in last night, delayed. My kids started at a new school this morning, like all the way across town. So that was a whole new routine thing. And we tried to get in the car with my youngest, but there was a spider in the car, so that set the whole thing. That set the whole thing back. And then I woke up this morning and this we're launching my new book today, and like the landing page went out and it didn't work. So it's literally just like one thing after another.
Damn.
Yeah.
But you just keep going.
You try. I
Yeah,
try.
right.
I think I get less rattled than I used to. Are you like a routine guy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I need that because I feel like without that, my anxiety gets out of control. If I don't have my things that I'm sticking to.
Yes.
I have too many thoughts. Like, what do you have? Like 1,000, some people have like 1,000 thoughts a minute or something. So if I don't know like what's coming next, sometimes I get into trouble. I get into trouble a lot on podcasting. I constantly have to do a podcast and then deal with whatever I said in the moment, just the repercussions of that.
Wait, so
Yeah.
do you feel like the routine deals with the anxiety, or does the routine create the anxiety? I feel like it goes both ways with me.
I guess it could go both ways. For me specifically, my routine helps with my anxiety. Like the more I just try to wing it and free flow through things,
Sure.
I know that that's calm and
Yeah.
I get that. But I just from experience, I really get into trouble. Like when I just, like yesterday I was on the podcast just saying whatever I wanted. And then I woke up this morning and was like, you're going to really have problems with your family for saying what you said in public. And so I'm like, okay, that was a mistake. But the way I deal with that now is I just say, you know what, man, today's a new day. You'll do better. Whatever. I always think worst case scenario now. That's what helps me so much in my life. I'm just like, you know what? What's the worst possible thing that's going to happen is, okay, maybe that person won't have me on their podcast. And some people will think I've offended some people. I'm a comedian.
But wait, how does routine, it feels like you putting your foot in your mouth is very different than being a creature of routine.
Oh yeah. Oh, well, going back to that then, yeah. I know sometimes my brain goes, I think for me, I have to, if I don't have a routine, what's going to happen then is I'm just going to sit kind of, with my own thoughts for too long and with no direction, and my anxiety, which I've just now in my life kind of learned how to control it the best way I think I can control it. I think I'll always be a part of me, but that's the only way that I can be like, hey, when you have these anxious thoughts that are coming up, if you know that at 1:00, that's when you normally go to the gym, and at 2:30 is when you pick up your kids, and at 11 a.m. is when you try to break your fast and have a meal, I'll know that like, well, I only got 15 minutes till my next thing. So whatever these anxious thoughts, they're going to have to be put to the back burner because I have to do my thing that I always do at that time.
Yeah.
That's how it is for me.
Yeah. I'm a big, like this is the eating window. This is when I do this. This is when I start this. This is when I finish this. But I find it keeps the anxiety at bay to a degree, but it also creates opportunities for anxiety because now you need things to go a certain way. Right? Like, okay, now, I don't know, your kid had a doctor's appointment or this thing happened. Now the routine's blown apart. So you have to just like, shit, this isn't how I want it to be. But then also it's like I think a regular person is like, hey, I try to get started around 9:00.
Right.
But if you're the person who's like, I start at 9:00.
Right.
Then now you've created this thing that has to happen, not just an expectation, but you've created a necessity that you don't actually have control over.
Right.
Because traffic, children, other people, all these things can get between you and the thing you have said that if I do this, I will feel soothed.
Right.
And if I don't do it, I will feel distressed.
Right. Yes.
Now it's like the universe decides whether you get that thing or not.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like that way in therapy. Like, like I know therapy is a good thing for a lot of people. I get it. And I've been in and out of it for a long time. But I've been like, I was doing good until I had this Tuesday 11:15 therapy session, and then I'm talking about all these things that I'm kind of making a bigger deal in my head about, because I feel like I want to talk to my therapist and have something to talk about, and be like, this is what's bothering me in my life. But it's like, I think I exacerbated my brain for this session, when if I would have just not done that, and I would have just went to the gym or went for a walk or done whatever is normally in my routine that day, I would have not felt, I like feel worse sometimes after. I'm like, I don't know, man. Like I don't, but then I start to go like, well, I can't be the only person in the world that doesn't need therapy. Of course I need it. But I'm like, why is this not making me feel better?
For me, it's that, and it's like now I have this hour thing in the calendar, or if like I'm going to do it in person, then I got to drive across town. I got I got to leave by a certain time to arrive by a certain time. So it's like, is the thing helping or not? Because it's now this like thing that my life is pivoting around.
Right.
So it better be good, or else like.
Right.
Not better be good, but like it better be having a positive impact, or I'm just stressing myself out for no reason.
Yeah, I know. And I'm trying to go now, like where I'm like, the thing that gives me the least amount of stress, where I am like just stress free, is when I'm with my kids. Yeah. So like, I'm just like, two places, when I'm with my kids and when I'm on stage doing stand-up. I feel like zero anxiety. All my anxiety about stand-up is the moments before and the time after. It's just about, what did I just do? Why did I say that? And then leading up to, oh my God, what am I going to do? What am I going to say? But when I'm actually saying it and doing it, it is truly zero. As calm as I could ever be in my life is when I'm on stage. And then I feel that same calmness with my kids. So I'm not the dad that like flips out about anything. I'm just like, I love they're kids. My response is always, they're kids. I don't care. I love them. So, and then I feel like so I'm trying to think of ways where it's like, how much, like, because I know my kids are going to get older and then they're not going to want to be with me as much. And I get that. So I'm like, I'm trying to just figure out ways to be home, to still feel fulfilled in my career and be home as much as possible. Because in my career, the guys who go on and make, $50 million, they're all on world tours. Like you have to go away and leave your house
for long periods of time.
And I don't want to do that, but yet I want to be successful. So I'm trying to figure out like that balance of doing it. And right now I'm at a point where it's like, you're watching some of my peers like really blow up, and I'm not being like, well, I could do that too. I'm saying, well, good for them, but I try to put myself in their shoes where I'm like, but do I want to go? Do I really want to go tour Australia? Is that what I want to do? I have to be away from my family for a month because they're not coming with me.
Yeah.
They have school. So I'm like, I love Australia, but I'm just going to be like, I'd rather just do shows in New York and Boston so I could get home at night. And it's a weird thing because my agent is like, I've never had a client like you, that you have an opportunity to do all these big things and you're telling me, you don't want to. No, I kind of don't want to do them. Because the reason is because you want to pick your kids up from school. He's like, which is fine. Yeah. I get it. He's like, but you have like major opportunity here, and you just look at me in the face and be like, no, I don't want to do it. So I don't know if it's self-sabotage or not.
No, I think about that too. Like, is it? Are you actually doing it for the right reasons, or is it this kind of weird imposter syndrome, ego thing? Because like when I'm home, am I actually home? Do you know what I mean? Like it'll be like, okay, I got offered to do this thing, but I have to fly over here to do it. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be gone. Or they wanted to add an extra thing, so I'd be gone an extra day or whatever. And then I'm home, and it's like, well, I got all the stuff I want to do. It's not like I'm sitting around all day just being a parent, right?
Right.
And so like when you look at it like actually comparing apples to apples, so okay, I was gone for 24 hours, but I was home. But how many of the 24 hours was I home? And then how many of the 24 hours was I home for? Was I actually present for? The numbers start to be less, you're the greatest dad in the world. Do you know what I mean?
Got it.
And then so going like, actually probably the way to do it is to like accept a good chunk of the things and be gone when you're gone, and then be home when you're home. Right. Not just patting yourself on the back for physically not being away.
Yes, it's a good point, because I think you had said once that Jerry Seinfeld had said like he wants the garbage time with his kids. So like I kind of, when I heard that, I was like, there have been times where I would really beat myself up about that exact thing. I'd be like, where I'm home, I said no to this thing to be home, but now we're all like on our devices, or we're all like watching a movie, or my kids don't even want to talk to me, or there was an argument, but I'm like, but all this is time with them.
That's true. I'm just saying, it's like, okay, so for me, I try to measure, like when I'm traveling, I measure it in how many bedtimes am I gone? So
Okay.
like that's like to me. So like last night was tough because I was supposed to get home by like 8, but I got home at like 10.
So you missed the bedtime.
So it's like
Yeah.
I might as well have just taken a later flight, you know?
Right.
But so anyways, I measure in terms of bedtime. But then like sometimes I'll catch myself during a bedtime and I'm like, am I here for this or am I trying to wrap this up? Do you know what I mean?
Got
Like
it.
I turned down a work thing for this. And then what am I doing? I'm trying to rush through this to do a less important work thing
Right.
in the other room when it's
Right.
done, you know? So like you can kind of like, it's this kind of like wallflower thing. Like, I don't know if you had this when you were a kid where you're sort of like, well, I could be doing that. I could be over with the popular kids, but I'm choosing not to.
Right.
And I think you can end up making some career and life decisions where you're telling yourself that you're doing this like harder, more principled thing, but really you're just like afraid, you
Yes.
know?
Yeah.
Or you're just not putting yourself out there. And by not putting yourself out there, you're not having to deal with, oh yeah, I agreed to go on the Australian tour and now ticket sales are light, or, you know, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like by opting out, you kind of get both. You go, I could have,
Right.
but I'm not having to take
Exactly.
the risk of doing it.
And that's a new part. I never thought of it that way until very recently, where I've been like, hey man, are you using your kids actually as a cop out? Because when you're like, oh, I'm not doing as well as so and so because I'm a dad. It's
Yes.
like, no, you asshole.
Yes.
It's a cop out. But I feel like I'm going to be 40 in a few months, which I know people like, that's not really that much different than 39, but there's something about like that number in our society where it's like, oh, now you're 40.
I think it's because when our parents were 40, like 40 was old and now it's not old. Like,
Right.
you look, like, you mentioned Seinfeld. You look at George Costanza, like he's supposed to be young, but like people who looked older sooner.
Yeah.
So 40 was like old to us, whereas like now, you know, it's not, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It feels like a benchmark and it's really not that much
Yeah,
of a benchmark.
but I've gone to this where I used to be a lot, very much. You know, I mentioned a lot, like say something on a pod or in my stand up,
Yeah, it seems to be a problem for you.
and then people are like, and then I'm like, oh shit, like why did I say that? Like, you know, like my family's gonna be upset. Like that was nuts, whatever. And but now I'm at a point where I'm like, hey man, like the career that I have, like, you know, takes care of multiple people in my family, which I'm very proud of.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like, I am who I am in the moment, and that's just what I do. I can't do it any other way. My brain is just, I'm kind of always been this way. I've always been like, I'm a guy that thinks after. Even when I was playing sports, my coach would always be like, there's some people that think before diving on the floor into the stands, and some people think after. You are the guy that thinks after, and you always have been, and that's just your brain. And I guess I'm getting to the age now where I'm like, kind of like having this energy where I'm like, you know, either accept me, as I accept you for you, or don't accept me at all. You can't just accept like one part of me,
Yeah.
type thing. And so I'm getting better at just, you know, liking me, because for a while there was like people would say, oh, I like you, your comedy helps me so much, it helped me with this and that, which is nice. But I would literally in my head be like, I cannot imagine why you would like me at all, what you would think is funny about me at all. I would never say that to them because that's too much.
But I would
internalize
deflect the
it.
compliment and not
Always.
accept- yes.
Where now
Sure.
I'm just going to say, you know what, Chris? Now it's like, dude, you're better off just saying thanks. I appreciate that I could help you. Just say that, because the rest of the stuff is just like your own thoughts just sucking you in. It's like, you are who you are. You're going to have to like accept you. I was like, I can't live another 40 years being like, I don't know really who I am. It's like, dude, you know who you are. Just
Right.
be that guy.
Well, there's some ego too. It's like you somehow know better than this person. Like they're saying that they liked you.
Right.
Right. And you're like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
Like I know better.
Yeah.
I'm actually a piece of shit and you couldn't possibly enjoy what I'm doing.
Right.
There's just this sort of self-absorption that runs through on both ends of the spectrum. There's the ego of like, oh, I'm better than everyone. And then there's this ego of like, I suck and I know better than everyone, even though there is tangible and demonstrable proof to the
Right.
contrary that you are good at what you do.
Well, it's this kind of paradox, because I believe the big reason why I am the way I am that way, which I don't love about myself, is the Catholic guilt. I was hardcore
Yeah.
Northeast, you know, New York Catholic parents, like whatever. And then so I went away from Catholicism for a long time, but now I'm back.
Oh, really?
Now I'm back in to religion. Now I'm back just saying I fully, you know, believe, and it's just my ideas. Whatever anybody else wants to do is up to them. I'm just like, I'm back, and I'm looking at Catholicism as the thing that I think made me this way that I don't like, but also the thing that's helping me be better and be more accepting of who I am as a human being.
Do you actually believe it, or is it just like comfortable, the rhythms of it?
I believe, after I read Case for Christ, that book by Lee Strobel, I'm a big historical facts guy, and I do believe that there was enough evidence in there for me to be like, this is enough that I feel like I should believe what I was told by the priests and nuns when I was little. This is what they weren't all wrong. Yeah, there's stories and they get a little crazy, but I'm like, if you're telling me that these accounts were writing about Jesus' resurrection and his existence within some of the earliest accounts within 5 years of his death, I'm like, all right, I'll go for it. I'll believe. Because I feel like the problem with me for a while was I was half-assing it. I had one foot in, one foot out. So it's like, just go all in. And my thing now is like, look, if when I die, I was so wrong, I'd be like, that's fine.
Pascal's wager. Do you know what that is?
Pascal's wager? No. I've heard
Pascal's wager is like, should you follow these ideas or not? It's like, if you're wrong, then you go to hell.
Yeah.
Right? And if you're if you're wrong and it doesn't exist, then you were just a good person your whole life. Works out pretty nice.
Yeah.
If you're right, that's also great, right? The wager is like, it's better to follow these ideas and turn out it was all nonsense,
right,
than to not follow the ideas and it turns out it was true.
Yeah, because I feel like that's exactly what I'm doing. I feel like a lot of my problems come from one foot in, one foot out. A lot of, even when you're on social media or today's world, it's like there's always one thing and then they can disprove it. So I'm like, you know what I'd rather do? What's going to just make me feel better is just to make a choice and just say, I'm believing it. And that's just what I want to do. And if people, I'm never, ever, ever going to be like, you should believe too. I'm just like, this is just what I do. It makes me feel better. Once a week, I know I'm going to have an hour to listen to, good things, meditate, kind of get off my phone. Maybe my kids will come, maybe they won't. I will never make them come. My mom was like, that's a problem. My mom was like trying to shove Catholicism down my throat. And I was like,
also just the logistics. I was like, why did we spend every Sunday let's start Sunday off with a loss where we're all mad at each other and fighting and coordinating this thing.
Yeah, I tell my 8-year-old, because the 3-year-old, she'll come or not come, but I tell my 8-year-old, how do you feel today? Do you want to come? Do you want to go sit there and then we'll go to the park after?
Yeah.
And if she says no, then it's no. Then I said, all right, I'll be back in an hour and then we'll go to the park. I will never, where I grew up, you real? What are you going to do? She would be like, Chris, you're not going to come to church? What are you going to stay here and masturbate? I'd be like, yes, that's what I'm going to do. The angels are crying when you do that.
I was Catholic growing up, and then we moved across town, and then we weren't Catholic anymore.
Interesting.
Because my parents didn't want to
go to the church.
It was just, they went to a more convenient, different church.
I like your parents. I was like,
oh, it's not that serious then, huh?
Yeah. Well, I think really nothing's that serious, right? Like our thoughts are. I'm making up my life with my thoughts. Like I'm creating problems that don't exist at all. Like I'm constantly, and I know that. So. I try to remember that. I forget it sometimes, but I try to, as much as I can, just remind my kids that things are not that big. Even being late for school, it's like we're striving to be on time. I want us to be on time, but if we're 10 minutes late, it's okay. It's truly okay.
No, we talk about that it's like, look, it's better to be on time, and at the same time, acting dangerously to get there on time is not an improvement.
No.
Do you know what I mean? Like I'm not going to, first off, rush. I'm not going to rush putting you in your car seat. I'm not going to rush driving so we can get there in time. But I struggle with that because this is like, I think back to the routine thing. Like, I'm like, okay, I like to start writing at 9. That's like when I start doing. That's the routine that we're on now. And so this is just a thing I made up, right? This is like 9 is the time. But why am I stressing about, because there was a spider in the car and now I got there at 9:05. Like, why in my head is that a huge deal? Because there's the discipline of doing the thing. You get really rigid. You create rules. Like, this is how much I write every day. This is how many times I go up each week, right? You come up with your things and you understand that the person who makes lots of excuses is never going to end up doing it, because once you start making excuses, you make an endless amount of excuses. But the flip side of that is not such rigidity that you, 1, have anxiety, and 2, you have no room for spontaneity or just the reality of life not being in your control. So
Right.
I'm trying to remind myself, hey, this is a book. First, I've been working on this series of books I'm doing for 5 years, and I'm not like, there's still another year plus in this cycle. So this isn't a thing that's being measured in 5-minute increments.
Right.
So the idea of whether I showed up today is it, and then what's also like, I go, okay, I'm rushing through school drop off so I can get there I can have an extra 5 minutes. But then conversely, if some business opportunity comes along and I have to be gone for 2 days to do a talk or whatever, I'm like, sure. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'm I'll accept that because there's a monetary amount attached to it. But then here, my kid needing 5 more minutes, I'm like, let's move this along. And so the discipline can become like, not a problem, but it's like this thing that once you flip on, it's hard to flip off.
Yeah, my father always would say, I'm sure you've heard it before, we said, listen, if it's not going to matter in 5 months, don't give it more than 5 minutes. Just do not even stress yourself out with these things that you won't care about. Like road rage. My dad would always say, like, road rage was the dumbest thing because you can change the course of your life for something you won't remember in an hour. It is so in the moment thing. And so I try to remind myself of that, where I'm like, like we're getting so bent out of shape because we're 3 minutes late for school. It's like, dude, tomorrow we won't. Who cares? Like,
yeah, you aggressively pass someone. You do some slightly dangerous maneuver to get ahead of someone who's going like 10 miles below the speed limit, and then you're both caught at the same light. 5 minutes later, and you're like, okay, that was a big gamble for literally no gain.
Right.
But yeah, that's the there's this sort of. The Buddhists call it like willful will. Like you're trying to make things a certain way. And I think people think that's what Stoicism is, right? Because Stoicism is this sort of self-control, self-command, but it's also this like toughness and discipline and systems. But like it can make you very, not just miserable, it can also make you like stupid because you're like needing things to be a certain way and you're not asking, does it actually need to be this way in this situation?
Yeah. Like I feel like sometimes I think, like, is this Stoicism, right? Because my dad is just like old school, like New York guys. Like sometimes they make you think about things where you're like, that was pretty stupid, but it's also kind of smart. And so like I remember this wasn't stupid. This was actually a lesson where I'm like, okay, I get that. And it was helpful. We were in Brooklyn, right? And meter maid, like a guy who got a ticket from like his meter was, and it's like greaseball Italian guy came out. He was like, are you fucking kidding me? To the meter maid, he was like, I'll bash your head in. You're going to give me a ticket? Like going crazy. And my dad and I are across the street. We're just listening. And my dad's like, you see this how stupid is that? And he was like, that guy's mad at the meter maid. He goes, but the guy has a Mercedes Benz, right? Yeah. He goes, I know he owns that cafe. He's wearing a $20,000 chain. He goes, does he want to switch places with the meter maid?
Sure.
The meter maid doesn't want to give the ticket. That's just what he is. He came here. He probably came from another country. He was like, what I would do if I was that guy is that that $100 ticket is just a reminder that I don't have to do that. And I have money. I got life. I got life by the balls. And this guy's getting so bent out of shape over $100 ticket to him. This guy's a multimillionaire. What is it? It's nothing. It's a drop in the bucket. He's screaming at this guy doesn't want to do that. And I was like, that's actually a good way of looking at it. He was like, so he said to me, he was like, so never get mad at the meter maid, Chris, because you don't have to do that. And I was like, interesting.
There's a thing from Seneca that says we should pay the taxes of life gladly. So he doesn't just mean like, hey, look, every year your tax bill comes due and it is what it is. You got to pay it. But I think he's saying like, look, delays are a tax on travel, like, critics are attack on being successful, like rumors and gossip are an attack are attacks on doing things. Annoying people are attacks on living in a city. Like there's taxes to everything, right? And you just pay them because that's what they are. Like being mad about them doesn't make them any less. You might be able to skirt one or two, here or there, but in the end, you pay a lot of taxes in life, and just accept it. And I just try to think about that, like. When you start to be successful, your tax bill, your literal tax bill goes up and up and up, right? It starts to be very large. I remember one time, the first time my tax bill was larger than what I thought a lot of money to make in a year was. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now, like, I pay that quarterly. Like, the checks I write quarterly, I'm like, this, if I had just made this, I would have said, like, oh, shit, you're doing great.
Right.
So, like, one of the things you realize when you pay a lot of taxes is that you're paying a lot of taxes because you have a lot of income.
Yeah.
Right. Like
yeah.
Even the most in America, you're paying like 40%. Right.
Right.
Which it used to be like 95%.
Right.
So the point is you can remind yourself when you pay a large tax bill. And I'm not saying you don't have an accountant that tries to minimize your tax. Of course you do. But you go, I'm paying a lot of taxes because I'm making a lot of money. Right.
Yeah.
And when you're paying taxes, like yesterday I'm sitting on the runway and we're just sitting there. We had to wait like 30 minutes or whatever because of a thunderstorm. That sucks. But I also flew from Washington, D.C. to Austin in 3 hours. That's a miracle.
Yes.
You know, like that's and planes don't crash that much.
Right.
And they don't crash that much because there's rules that force them to be overly cautious about that. Like these are just the taxes of life.
Right.
And you pay them gladly because they're the one thing that never goes away. And in fact, the more you do, the more people you meet, the better things go, the more there's going to be of these things. And the ability to be like, shit, I got a ticket. That sucks, but it's an inconsequential amount of money to me is a much better place to come at it from than, or let's say you don't have a lot of money. I'm alive, and that's why I'm getting this ticket, is much better than the alternative. And deciding to be a dick to a person who's just doing a job, even if they are the tip of the spear of in an unjust or fucked up system, again, it's better than the alternative.
It's better than the alternative. And I think, too, a lot of times, I equate money and time as like time having much more value than money to me now. Yeah. And like in September, I did, Radio City is like one of the biggest things, right, in New York, right? The next step is you go to Madison Square Garden. So it did a show at Radio City, and it sold out. A few days it took, right? So it was great. And so I'm telling my dad, and I was like, Dad, Radio City sold out 4 months before the show, whatever it is. He goes, great. He goes, don't add anything else. I know that's what you're talking to me. That's what you're going to ask me. And I was like,
or like to add another date.
He was like, yeah, don't add another date. And I was like, no, but we have 4 months and this one sold out already. He goes, yeah, no, I know, but I know you're going to ask me, do I think you should add a second show? And I'm telling you, no, you already sold out. You did the thing. Why do you want to go through all that pressure? Again, you set out, you told me what your goal was to sell out Radio City, and you did that. He was like, if you add a show, you'll make more money, but then we can't do the after party as a family. We can't celebrate any of this stuff with you. We're then going to have to, we'll come to your first show, and then we're going to go home because we're not going to stay for your second show.
Yeah.
That's all about you, which he was like, obviously, my advice is to not do it, even though your agents are going to tell you it's going to twice the money. It's hot right now. I don't think you should do it. You should sell out. So I did it. And
you didn't listen.
I didn't listen.
I was going to ask. That's the kind of very sage, wonderful advice that almost immediately gets ignored.
Immediately, I didn't add it that night. I added a second show the next night.
Okay.
And so I thought it wasn't as bad. I thought it was like, I was like, okay, Dad, I figured out a way that we can both be happy.
Sure.
We could still have the after party at Radio City after the show, and we can be together as a family. But then I'm going to do a show at the theater at Madison Square Garden, down the road the next night. And he was like, I think, again, that was a mistake because maybe you've solved one problem, but you've now the first one sold out quick. So if the second one doesn't sell out like that, you're going to think you're a failure. And I was like, no, I promise I won't. And then that second show didn't sell out to a day before the show. And I felt like
you were nervous the whole time.
Well, not only was I nervous, the entire, team that I had around me that was so excited about Radio City, within 2 weeks, they were like, man, why isn't this other show selling? What did we make a mistake? It became negative right away. Yeah. When if I would have just said, hey, I got to win, it's like I would have been happier for longer.
Yeah.
And so I guess just being older, my father being older, again, kind of having some health issues, he's like, I'm telling you, when you get to the end, you're not going to care if you did that second show that night. What you're going to care about is like, oh, I had a great night with my family. And that night actually did wind up well, Radio City, because we had a little, drinks and food with my family. But then I was in bed with my girl and kids at 11 p.m. I was in bed with them watching, we were watching Ace Ventura, and we all fell asleep before midnight. So like this whole like rock star thing you think is going to happen. Like what people would always say, what'd you do after Radio City? Did you go to Rainbow Room? Did you guys go to, what did you do? And I'm like, dude, I was literally in bed. And I don't have like any FOMO about that. I was like, oh, that was the right choice. But I do regret not listening to my dad. And I do listen to him a lot more now, where I'm like, you know what, man, there's no end to up. It's like, yeah, if you sell out quick, you can keep adding and adding and adding, but really what you're doing is just adding stress and pressure. You're not kind of taking your foot off the gas, where I think sometimes in life you have to, even if that means you're going to sacrifice some money.
Did you feel, I'm curious, because like we have these things that we like strive for our whole life. Like
Right.
for an author, it's like, I want to hit the bestseller list, or, you know, for a comedian, it's like, I want to sell at Madison Square Garden or Radio City Music Hall. You do the thing.
Right.
You're there. You win the gold medal or the award or whatever. And how does it feel? You like, is it actually what you thought it would be? Do you feel good enough in that moment? And how did you actually feel?
I felt good.
Yeah.
I felt great. People said, oh, you got to take it in. It's going to be a moment, you know, try to like slow it down. I don't really remember much of being on stage other than walking out. Then it was kind of like just in the moment. What I will say though, which is interesting, which is Jasmine, my girlfriend, was like, this is, you know, I've noticed this about you, is I'm doing the best I've ever done in my career now. Like I've financially the best, had the most accolades, have the most things going on. For the first time ever in my career, it's like the industry's, I don't want to say coming to me, but I'm not auditioning for things. They're like, hey, we have things for you. Like sure. You have a vehicle. But I feel like the most disconnected from comedy, and I feel almost, as far as what I am as a comedian, kind of the least power that I've ever had in my career. And Jasmine was like, you know, I think it's because what's happened to you is, because she's been with me for, you know, 10 years. She's like, so she's seen when we had truly nothing. She was like, you got used to being successful. So you always chase. You're a chaser. You're always chasing the adrenaline rush of like, what's the next big thing? And you're getting these things, and like you kind of forget that, like how much, like even when you're saying, oh man, that show is only 70% sold out, but it's still like over 1,000 tickets. She was like, do you remember like when you used to go away in 2016 and you wouldn't sell 40 tickets over the course of a weekend anywhere? You just couldn't sell. Sure. And so she was like, I think you get that, you feel that detachment because there's no like, you've done a lot of great things. So she was like, you know, I think you should just like, she was the one that told me, she's like, I think you should go back to like your roots, go back to like even doing some of like the open mics, even though, you know, you're past that, like go back to like what drove you to be like love comedy, because all these goals that you have written, you've gotten most of them. And now you're like, kind of like, oh, I'm kind of not doing so well now. And she's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, look at our life. Yeah. You're doing great. So I'm dealing with that, but I'm aware of it. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to correct it.
Yeah. Do you think there's going to be this moment where you feel like you arrived? Like you would think you could leave Radio City Music Hall feeling like a made guy.
Like I made it. And yeah. I don't feel like I made it now. No matter what you tell me or don't, I don't know what like I'll look at Kevin Hart and be like, oh, he made it. You know?
But do you think he feels like he made it?
I don't know. I wonder, because I wonder if it just never stops. Like, you know, like I heard George Carlin talk once about how George Carlin is, you know, to a comic, one of the greatest comedians ever, absolutely on the Mount Rushmore, sure. 14 HBO comedy specials. It's an insane thing to do. One HBO special, he did 14, just okay. Genius. And I heard him at the end of his life, I think it was on Larry King, talking about how he always felt like he wasn't shit because of Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor was the guy. And he just was like, if Richard Pryor didn't live in my time, I would feel good about myself. But you wonder if, like, even if Richard Pryor didn't live, you still wouldn't feel good about yourself. You'd find another reason.
Well, I remember thinking, like, if I could write one book, that would be a thing. Like, not even like how many copies it sold or did it hit a bestseller list or whatever it did. But I was like, if I could write a book, that would be cool. Mm-hmm. I've literally written so many books, I don't know how many. Like, I always get the number wrong. Right. So, like, you'd think you'd be like, you did it. You feel, but no, you don't, right?
So you feel the same as me at times.
I mean, yeah, I think, like, there's a good part about it and a bad part. The good part about it is you're always starting at zero, and that's what keeps you sort of hungry and humble about it, right? Because, like, it doesn't matter if you're Kevin Hart or the greatest person who ever did what you did. You're still waking up and facing like a blank page. Like, you have to come up with a new hour. You still have to go up in front of an audience and do your thing, even if you've done it hundreds of times. So the fact that the thing is hard, and by definition, you always have to keep doing it in a new way, that prevents you from ever feeling like, I've made it, I'm the best, I'm perfect. Right. So that keeps you hungry and good in a positive way.
Right.
The other part of it is because it is hard, and then because other people around you are doing great, there's this part of you that's not looking at your success relatively, like where you were a couple years ago, or just what is your potential.
Right.
And then you're comparing, so you're not looking there because you would feel objectively that you've done a lot and you've arrived. You're looking at other people. And I have to remind myself, I chose to write about an obscure school of ancient philosophy.
Right.
There's a fucking ceiling on that.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like to sell millions of that is insane in and of itself. But that like, it's like you chose to be a classical musician. You know what I mean? You chose to be a Christian musician. Whatever you chose to do, you didn't choose to be like a pop star. You know, like you didn't. You can be really big at this thing, and you can redefine what big in that thing is. But you probably chose you by choosing this thing, you were unchoosing other things, and you have to accept that. And so I try to remind myself, you're really running your sort of your own race,
right?
And it's not helpful to go, well, this person sold 5x, right? It's like, okay, but did they face the same constraints as you? And also did all these other random things outside of our control, the moment of time it came out, what they're marketing, all this other stuff. So but yeah, you would like to think that not just accomplishing things, but far surpassing whatever your wildest expectations for what those accomplishments would be, would make one feel good. Right. And the reason you don't is that you were trying to fix an internal thing with external achievements, and that's fundamentally impossible.
And then that's why, what you do is you just do the work. It's like, if I'm just doing, you really start to feel bad about yourself when you're like, I'm in this career and I'm not doing the work
good work,
and then you're like, why am I not getting all these things? And because the last thing sometimes we'll say is, well, I'm the problem. I'm the one who's not putting out good work. Yeah. But for me, I think as long as I'm just every day trying to write a new bit, then I'm doing the work, and then eventually it'll pour out of me. Like, I just have faith at this point that it always will. But, I think I start to get in my head when I'm not realizing, Chris, the reason why you're feeling disconnected is really just because you're not writing the way you used to write. And you're saying, you basically gave yourself a break. You basically gave yourself a pat on the back when you shouldn't have. Even though you don't announce it that way, you're carrying that pat on the back energy. So I think that's why Jasmine was like saying it without saying, she's like, you should just go back to the open mics. You were always gone at the open mic. She's like, our routine was always to put the kids to bed by 8:00, and then I'm out the door at 9. That's how our life was. And now I don't do that. Now it'll be like, put the kids to bed. And I'm like, I did 2 podcasts today. I got to get into the city at 9:30. I'll go tomorrow, right? I'll write at home in the morning. And then I don't do that because I'm like, I'll make up an excuse like, you know what, man, maybe I'll watch a documentary on history to research about a bit I want to do about the Revolutionary War. Yeah. And then, you start to become that. So I think just kind of always checking yourself, and just, I think one of the Stoics was talked about like, kind of like not worrying about like, maybe it was the third thing. Yeah. That type of thing where it's like, don't worry about, like, that's, trying to get recognition for everything you do is the problem thing. Just do the thing because you want to do it, and then it helps someone.
Yeah, Marcus Aurelius says, you do someone a good turn and they received the good turn. Don't ask for he says, like an idiot, you ask for the third thing, which is recognition of that thing. So yeah, just doing the work, doing your best. Of course, it's wonderful if it's well received, if you're well compensated for it, and more often than not, you are. But it's wanting that was your best work, or that was amazing, or you want that thing. One of the things that I think that's good about writing and also comedy, well, it's a double-edged sword. So you get good at the thing, and then the reward or the expectation in the industry is to stop doing that thing. Right. So writers write a couple books and then they become consultants, or they go give talks or whatever. And then the hard part of sitting down and writing, they don't do that much anymore, or they do it every once in a while. And then comedy, going up multiple times a night, and then you can get past a point where you have to do that.
Yeah, or you could keep doing stand-up, and then they want to put you in a sitcom, which takes you away from stand-up.
Yeah, and the it's the actual craft part of it, the doing the thing, that keeps you, I think, humble, but also fulfilled, because you're getting this sort of daily rewards of doing the thing that attracted you to the space to begin with. Like, I didn't become a writer as a means to an end because what I really wanted was a podcast or talks or going to conferences. Like that wasn't that like, like I'll do that if I'm compensated for it. But the thing I wanted to do was be a writer. And my friend Austin Cleat says it's like you have to do the noun rather than be the verb.
Okay.
Right? Like you want to, be the verb, not do the verb, not be the noun. Right? Like, are you a writer or are you writing?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, are you doing comedy or are you just identified as a comedian?
Yes.
And if you're doing the thing on a daily basis, I think it keeps you more in the headspace that you want to be in.
Yeah. Do you know Colin Quinn?
I mean, I know his work.
Colin Quinn, yeah, is like a mentor of mine, like New York legend.
Sure.
He's in Austin as well. We just had breakfast, and you know, we talk a lot, and he's a great guy to have because he's like that old school guy that is just about the comedy, just about the art. Like he does not like that comedians have become like arena acts. He's like, that is fundamentally not what this was about. This is an intimate art form. You know, like I am about the comedy. He's the guy, like even if you have like a joke that went viral, he'll be like, you know that's hacky bullshit that you're doing. And you know that was an easy punchline and it went viral because people don't know what we know and you're better than that and things like that. But then if you have something that's good that went viral, he's very appreciative. He's like, that's the art. That's what you do. And so what I love about him is because he's content in who he is, because he said, he's like, dude, he's like, you know, I've been doing comedy he's been doing comedy 35 years. He's like, I've never sold half the tickets in New York that you've ever sold. I never have. He goes, but I'm happy at this point in my life because I do the work every day. Every day I'm writing. I'm trying to push myself forward. And he was like, you know, he's like, he's going on a tour right now. And he's like, you know, I got dates all over in Seattle and Vancouver. I'm going to be away. He's like, and I know that the shows aren't sold out. He's like, I make one little joke about it to the crowd. And then I go on and I do my thing because I love to be present with the audience and do my comedy. He was like, I think you young guys, you can get so famous so quick because of the internet and sell so many tickets so quick because of the internet. But then you forget, like, that's not what comedy was supposed to be about. Like, you're not supposed to be judged on your likes or your ticket sales. It's like, oh, am I doing the work? He was like, you know, does your comedy feel urgent? Is it so urgent that I need to tell the audience tonight, this bit that's going to be cathartic for me? That's what it is. Sure. He was like, so don't forget that. Don't get wrapped up in, oh, well, you know, you were comedian of the year this year and now I'm not comedian of the year next year. It's like, it's so dumb. Right. He was like, we have such a subjective art form. People are going to love you. People are going to hate you. This is not the NBA. You don't make the team or not make the team. You're just doing comedy because you love it, or you're not doing comedy. That's who it is.
Yeah, I've tried to get to a place where, like, speaking of the NBA, I'm like, I'm in the league. That's what matters. I don't have to be the number one person in the league. What matters is, are you in the league or not? Are you one of the people that's able to do the thing? You know,
but how do you justify being in the league? Because you make a living doing writing, or like, I mean, obviously you're very successful, but how do I
know that I'm in the league?
Yeah.
It's a somewhat subjective measure, but I mean, like, I'm published by the largest publisher in the world. Yeah. Like, if I have an idea, someone will buy it.
Right.
And then the other part for me, as I was designing my career, is like, what I really hated was like coming up with something and then somebody else getting to decide whether it got seen or not.
Got it.
Right? Like what I wanted, it's not that I wanted the audience, like I needed people to know who I was, but it was like, I wanted to have, when I had something to say, I could be like, here's what I have to say. And there would be people listening. Right. And so like when I built out Daily Stoic, I mean, like Daily Stoic goes out to 1 million people every day.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I don't really need anything, because like I have an audience and that's who I talk to every day. Like that, like every day I wake up and I have a thing that I say to 1 million people. Right. And like that's being in the league. Do you know what I mean?
100%.
Like, I don't need to know, does someone have 2 million? Does someone have 5 million? Yeah. This person only has 50,000, but they're getting covered in the press all the time. They're getting invited. Like, I have an audience far bigger than I ever would have dreamed of having. And that's an insane number to write to every day. That's larger than the subscription of many newspapers. Yep. Like, that's it. I have an audience and I get paid to speak to that audience. Yeah. That's being a professional writer.
100%. Yeah, I agree. Because I think it's similar with comedy, where it's like, we kind of have to though like tell ourselves that, because like, you're either on the Knicks or you're not, right?
Yeah,
You're either
yes.
on an NBA, one of those
You have
NBA
a contract to
Yeah,
be
so
on
that's
that.
how. So I can objectively say, even though I'm sitting at the end of the bench for the New York Knicks, the LA Clippers, I am in the NBA, and that's what I am.
Yeah.
For us, it's like, obviously you're in the league, of course, but you feel like somebody 5 rungs lower than you. It's like, could they also justify it and say, well, so it's like that's why I think the imposter syndrome kind of comes in sometimes with these types of careers we have, because there is no objective measure to say what you have to decide if you've made it or not. So just, that's what I think sometimes gets complicated.
Well, it's like, were you always able to say I am a comedian, or did you feel like you had to earn it? Like, for me, it's like, what do you do? Like someone asks you and to go like, I'm a writer. I think probably what compels people to want to be famous or successful is to like not have to answer that question, just so people recognize you. But like, I think early on in my career, I was always very insecure when people would say, what do you do? And I'd be like, oh, I'm in I would just say something to end the conversation, because I hated the part where they would go like, what do you do? And I'd be like, I'm a writer. And they go, oh, have you written anything I've heard of?
Yeah.
And then I'd have to be like, probably not, like there was clearly some insecurity in me that wasn't able to identify it. And then I would also be driven nuts when like someone who was like a straight poser, like definitely not doing it, would be like, I'm a writer.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you're not. You work at a restaurant.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
But so like, it's, I think sometimes when you're insecure about it, it bothers you that other people are secure about it. When really, you either identify with it or you don't. It's a self-assignment.
Yes. Yeah. I used to, when I first became a comedian, was out there working just as a comic, when I'm going again to a city, you rent a car, they would say, what are you in town for? I would say, oh, I'm a comedian, and then it would be all the same questions and tell me a joke, and I've never heard of you. And I started just saying, I'm just in town for work.
Yeah.
I would never, ever, ever tell you I'm a comedian. Never.
Yeah.
And then it got to the point where, started to get a little bit more recognizable, and somebody would stop me and be like, oh, can we take a pic? And then the person they're with their friend, the person would say, I don't know who you are.
Yeah.
And then take a pic. So you're like, okay, up and down. You're like, I didn't ask for this. And my response would be like, you know what, to be honest, I don't know who you are either. I didn't ask for this. Your friend did. We're all strangers.
Yeah.
And then it became, with social media, you get recognized. People would say, oh, I know you from TikTok.
Yeah.
And that would hurt me initially, because I'd be like, no, I'm not a TikToker.
Yeah.
I do real stand-up. But then you start to realize, well, that's just the media, the mode where they're consuming stuff now. It's like the sitcom from back in the day. It's like now they see you on TikTok. That's what it is. So all these levels of acceptance, where now I'm just gone to the point where I'm like, if you recognize me, I'll give you my time. I'll always, I'm so appreciative. And if you don't recognize me or say something slick like that, I never even get mad. I just am like, buddy, we're all blessed. And then I keep moving.
I just tell people I own a bookstore.
Yeah.
And because it's like a nice thing. Like it doesn't, if you're like, if you don't say, it's like this whole other awkward conversation. So I just pick something and like, oh, well, whatever. And then it's also weird for me because I live in this small town. So there's this like weird sort of fishbowl-ness of like being a public figure and living in a small town. And sometimes I can't tell do they know me from my work, or do they know me because I live in this small town?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's weird, but it's better, I think, just not to think about it and to just do the thing.
Yeah.
It's better just to do the thing.
Just to do the thing, because no matter what, no matter whether you're in entertainment, working for Amazon, whatever your job is, I mean, our life is ticking by every day. So it's like, you might as well just be in the present as much as you can and enjoy everything, because, I mean, I know you know this, after how many books do you read? How many videos do you see when they interview people in their 90s and 100s on their deathbed? They're always saying the same thing. I don't care about money. I don't care. I would give all the money in the world back to have time back and to be present and close with my family. That's what they want. They say like relationships. I was just watching this video. All these elderly people were saying it is truly about relationships. That's what life is. It's not about money at all. How are your relationships with others? Don't be lonely. Have like a community around you. And, like you chase all these things. I think somebody said, I definitely heard you say it. I'm not sure what Stoic said it, but like paraphrasing, but like if the money is not buying you freedom, what's good is the money?
Yes.
Type thing. So like I think a lot about that. I'll see some of my peers going on these never-ending tours, and I'm like, you're just making more money, but you're not free. You're like always on to the next thing. Like, when do you get freedom from the financial gains you've made?
I remember this was a long time ago, but I was listening to some morning radio show, and then they interviewed Bill Clinton, and I was just like, the fucking president is on morning radio? Do you know what I mean? Like, I was like, the thirst of that. He was like promoting a book or something.
Yeah.
And I was like, this dude had control of nuclear weapons. And then here he is like hawking a book like on a show I've been on. You know what I mean? Like, you realize that you think that these people are so powerful and so free. I think about that. Like, Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world. And yet he wasn't that powerful because like people told him where he had to go and what he had to do.
Right.
And he had to like when Lincoln became president, it used to be like literally anyone could go to the White House. You would just like go and they'd get an appointment, and then you could be like, Mr. President, I want to be the customs officer in New Orleans. Like, you would like pitch the president for like these piddly little like federal job. And so Lincoln gets elected. He's in the middle of the Civil War, and he would just talk. He's like, I have to meet all these fucking people every day. It was like this line that snakes. Who's the president that got assassinated? Not Chester A. Arthur. And not Garfield. Was it Garfield? Oh, one of the president, McKinley. McKinley gets assassinated by some dude he just like spurned for a job.
Yeah,
So you think it's this incredibly powerful thing, and like actually their assistant is the powerful person because they're deciding what's going in the calendar or not.
Yeah,
and like you'll meet them and they'll be like, "Sorry, I have 7 minutes."
Yeah,
and it's like you think that success is going to give you autonomy and control of your life. But for a lot of people, it doesn't. And I would argue that that's not really success. Like,
no, it's not. And I think, like, to be honest with you, especially in today's world, the best way to be is somebody like you. You have your specific fan base. But other than that, you're not like world famous, like everyone knows who you are when you walk in like Oprah, right? You're not Taylor Swift, but yet you have full control of, of what you can say or do. You have fans that love you, that'll go to the ends of the earth for you. Your family has whatever they want. You have whatever they want, but yet you can maintain relative, you're recognizable, but like, again, relative anonymity where it's like, okay, 3 out of 10 people know you and they love you. But it's like, if you went and did something that was crazy, nobody would really, your fans would be like, no, we love Ryan. He's our guy. And we stay with you. Whereas sometimes I think like being like this world conqueror thing, it's like that is not all it's cracked up to be. It's like, dude, do you really want to be an A-list famous person? Do you know what life is like? You can't do anything ever in today's world.
Well, the other way I think about it is like you look at like really, really rich people and you see how it like destroys their family. You like you watch Succession or whatever, right? Like you see how it's just an impossible amount of pressure and temptation and control. It's not good, right? It's not good to have like truly like gratuitous wealth, right?
Right.
But what are it's like, so we know that intellectually, and then what are most people doing? They're hoping to get to like some extra level. Like no one's like, hey, I hope my startup is like medium level successful.
Yeah.
They're like, I hope I get purchased for $1 billion.
Right.
Even though you're just reading a story about a billionaire whose life fell apart. Or like every family that's ever been on a reality show has like totally been torn apart.
Yep.
Like the spouses get divorced, the kids have drug problems, one of them ends up going to jail. Like it never ends. Like, but if someone called you right now and you're like, Chris, we're thinking about doing, your family seems interesting, would you like to do a reality show about your life? Like this happened to me on multiple occasions, and I know this, and then I'm like, well, let's have a conversation about it. You know what I mean? Like you should be able to click, not interested in it at all.
Right.
It never goes well. And then you're like, but maybe I'm different. Maybe it'll go differently for me.
Right.
And it won't. It will not go differently.
So then what do you think is what is to like maintain that like happiness then? And like, what do you think we have to do? Like just be smart enough to know what to say no to type thing?
Yeah. You have to be able to say, like, I try to think, one of my rules is I try to think, if I accept this, when I'm looking back at why I got divorced, is this the answer?
Interesting.
You know what I mean? Not that every marriage lasts forever, and I could end up, who knows, right? But I try to go like, I try to not make decisions where I go, looking back, it was all that. It all began there. I remember in 2016, I got an offer to be a press secretary for one of the members of Trump's cabinet.
Right.
And I'm not a Trump fan, so I was like surprised to be asked, and I almost certainly wouldn't have made it like through the vetting process. But it was like I felt very clearly like this was like a crossroads moment where like my books were doing well and I had this, but like I was like, oh, this is the path where if I take it and it does work out, this is like sort of the Washington power broker path where you have a different kind of life and a different kind of career, and it might be really exciting. You might do a bunch of things, but I'm like, it's definitely tearing my family apart because like I live here and that is in DC, and either we do some complicated splitting thing or I would uproot everyone to pursue something that was basically just a feather in my cap extra for me,
right?
And that also would be insane hours, you know what and so I try, and I've had other ones where it's like, hey, especially when I was in marketing, hey, do you want to come do 6 months here in this sort of turnaround job,
right?
Or do you want to take do you want to be the head of this at this company? And they were always lots of money, and would have taken me in a very different direction in my life, and could have been interesting. But I would always go like, well, first off, what did I want to do? Like when I was, what was the dream? The dream was to be a writer. Right. So why am I accepting these things that are not that thing?
Right.
And then, what is that? What is the cost of that thing going to be? So often I think people take things because they're cool, because other people in their life say they should do them, because everyone accepts when offered to do this thing, and to not do it feels crazy.
Right.
But in a couple years, it will feel crazy that you did it.
That you did it. That's why that power of no. It's very, very difficult to do it. But in the moment, like I can't imagine why anyone would want to actively be president. No matter what side you're on, your life is going to get torn apart by the other side. And with social media, it will get really torn apart, and you're going to cause major problems for people that you say you love.
Yes.
So why are you even in a position to do that? And I was like, do they not think it? Or do we have different brains and they are just that power hungry? What is it?
Yeah, I mean the it's funny, like going back to the Stoics, that ambition, that lust for more and more and more is like the most timeless part of the human experience.
Right.
Why is Elon Musk starting more companies? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He says it's for humanity, but it's not. It's for him. Like
right.
he is addicted to chaos and drama and wants things always to be his way.
Right.
And so he can't, when he has an idea, he can't be like, someone else could do a good job of
right.
that, or
yeah.
like that that's his thing. And so that's probably good for humanity in some way, right? Like if the Europeans were like, yeah, Europe is pretty big, let's just chill here, then the rest of the world wouldn't look the way that it does. So now I'm not saying that was good for humanity, because obviously it wasn't so great in other ways. But the point is, like, if people didn't have this desire to always see what's on the next side of the hill, or to always achieve more or grow more, if Jeff Bezos was happy running a $10 million company, it wouldn't have become a $1 trillion company.
Right.
So like evolutionarily and economically, it's good to harness that energy.
Sure.
But it's probably bad for the individual. No one has. There's this line from this novelist Stefan Zweig, I think, where he says, "No conqueror has ever been surfeited or satisfied by conquests."
Right.
Like never in the history of the world has a Napoleon type been like, "I fucking did it, man."
Yeah.
Like Alexander gets basically as far east as a human has ever gotten. He's the most powerful man in the world. And his army's like, well, we did it. We're ready to go home, right? And he says, all right, you go home and you tell your families that you left me here to conquer the rest of the world.
Wow.
And then he fucking died. Like he got a disease and he died a horrible death. Or the other theory is that his men killed him so they could go home, right? And so like that's the thing that makes you do that thing,
right,
as we're talking about, is an extremely hard thing to turn off, even when you are so past the point.
So do you think there's anyone in history or anyone that you know that like has figured it out on how to just like balance that the right way? Or do you think it is part of our human DNA, as you mentioned, survival mechanism, where we just have to know about it and try to kind of limit it as much as we can, but it will never fully go away?
Yeah, I think it's hard to point at a specific person and be like, they crushed it, because like you don't know a person and you don't know what their family. But what I would say is that it's rarer to be the person who goes like, I've got 2 rings, I'm good, than to be Tom Brady who needs to go for 1 more, and then it comes at a cost. Right? Like in some ways, the person who is really great but doesn't need or thirst for one more or whatever is rarer.
Right.
That's the harder thing. Like the Stoics say, the greatest empire is command of oneself. So there's lots of people who have commanded big empires or big armies, but it's rarer to find a person who got really far at what they were good at. Like, again, there's the person who does nothing and they go, oh, it's because I've conquered all my desires and needs.
Yeah.
Sure you have.
Yeah.
You just never got asked.
Right.
But like, I think to be great, to achieve a level of mastery or success at your thing and be good with it is the most impressive thing. Like Seneca talks about how there's the poverty of having too little, like, because you're actually poor, and then there's the poverty of wanting more.
Right.
And to get to a place where you're like, I took this as far as it could reasonably or somewhat unreasonably be taken, and now I'm going to retire with dignity. Like, how many boxers retired at the right time? Like basically zero. Rocky's like basically the only one. He turned down like $1 million for his final fight in like 1950s money or whatever, like when it was actually a lot. And like, they just don't do it. They always go for one more, and then that's when they get Parkinson's.
Right.
Like there's one more job.
Right.
Just one more job, and then I'm out. Is when the bank robber gets caught.
Yeah, because it's almost like in our culture where it's like if you have success one year but not the next, then you're unsuccessful. It's like people forget about what you did last year. It's like you have to somehow keep this up, and that's like that rat race that you want to try to get out of. But it's tough, right? Because you're like, the player that just retires at the top of their career, then they're all over ESPN getting, just destroyed by everyone, and they let the fans down, and how selfish are they when they're like,
oh yeah, Andrew Luck just
there you go.
Made like $100 million, and he was like, I'm good. I don't want to get hit in the head anymore. And people were like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah, which is crazy because it's like, and that's an example of a guy who on paper is like, oh, well, he's actually figured it out, right? He made all the money. If you blow through $100 million, that's on you. You shouldn't be, even in today's economy with inflation, you should not be able to blow through $100 million. You should be good.
That's generational wealth.
Your kids should be good. Everything should be good. Yeah. Just put that in, let it earn interest. Don't even touch it.
Yeah.
And so, I think like something like that, but it's very ballsy, right? I mean, that was probably scarier for Andrew Luck than him getting sacked by, the biggest NFL linebacker in history. That's probably scarier for Andrew to be like, I'm going to tell the fans that I'm retiring when I don't really need to retire. My body can do it. I just don't want to get hit in the head anymore.
In a way, it's almost more courageous than being like, I'm going to try to win one more or to win the highest thing. To be like, hey, I didn't win a Super Bowl, but I was a starting NFL quarterback. And how many people can ever fucking say that? And I'm good.
Yeah.
That's pretty insane.
That's pretty.
Or to be great at the thing and not be a monster elsewhere. That's, I think, also very rare, right? They're probably related to each other, but it's very rare that you find someone who's extremely good at the thing and then like they can turn it off and go home and not be like the main character.
I always, my mom always told me a big thing that she always wanted me to remember, and I do, is I actually I had a pretty good accountant a few years ago, and I let him go because of how I saw him. He did this thing that my mom said, always watch out for that. My mom was like, always like, I want you to always like look for people that you can tell a lot about a person, how they treat the people they think they don't need.
Yeah.
So I always want you to look for that in human beings. Like, and I had this accountant who was just being so unnecessarily mean to our waitress at this lunch we were having.
Wow.
And I was just like, even though he's excellent at what he does, I was like, I actually just don't want, you are treating that person because you don't think you need her, you only need her in this moment, like she doesn't exist. And I just don't like that about you. I was honest with him. I was like, I don't like that about you at all. And I think you're excellent at what you do with the numbers. But even if I can find an account who's not as good as you, but is a better person, I'm just going to go with them. And then he was like, you're going to be broke. You're going to he started attacking me. I was like, oh, this guy really sucks. Because then.
Well, you got a glimpse into character.
Yeah.
There's a story about the Emperor Hadrian. So Hadrian has this remarkable, unprecedented moment in history. So Hadrian is the Emperor of Rome, and he doesn't have any children. Mm-hmm. So he has to choose a male heir. And so he chooses this guy, Antoninus Pius. He wants to choose Marcus Aurelius, but Marcus Aurelius is like a teenager. So he's like, that's the worst thing that could happen to a teenager. So he's like, I need like an intermediary.
Yeah.
So he chooses this Roman senator named Antoninus Pius, who has to in turn adopt Marcus Aurelius. So he sets up this. That's how Marcus Aurelius becomes the emperor of Rome. So the question has been, well, what did Hadrian see in Marcus Aurelius? We don't really know. And what did he see in Antoninus Pius? It was just then known as Antoninus. Pius is the name he gets because he's so wonderful. But because if you pick a lot of people in that time, you're like, okay, look, here's this defenseless boy, and I'm going to die. You're going to become emperor, and then you have to give it to him later. I mean, the first thing that guy's going to do is kill that person.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. And that doesn't happen. So how does he, the story is that Hadrian is heading into the Roman Forum one day, and he sees Antoninus helping his elderly father-in-law up a flight of stairs. No one's watching, and he doesn't know that Hadrian can see him, and he just sees him helping like an old man who is not like even a blood relative. He's just helping his wife's father up a flight of stairs. And the idea is that this glimpse of kindness and decency and softness is the confirmation that he already knew he had the political skills and the leadership skills. He had the ruthlessness to do it, but did he have too much of those things to possibly be the guardian of this person? And it's an incredible story because, they thought Antoninus would live for a couple of years. He lives for 20 years.
Wow.
So he grooms Marcus Aurelius for success for 20 years, and they become like father and son, but had no relation to each other whatsoever. It's like, how did it happen? And this glimpse, this moment of character is what I think, seals it up for him. And conversely, we have these moments of character where you see someone and you're like, oh, you're like a dick. Like you fundamentally see other people as expendable or worth less than you or whatever. And that's like a glimpse into probably how if some push came to shove, there was some problem, he would treat you that way. The accountant would treat you that way.
Right.
And that's why.
Yeah. Like I have a thing going on right now where I was fortunate enough. I sold a sitcom idea in the room to 2 major networks just last week in LA. It's like a cool, it's just cool. I'm like, this is like, big networks. And my agent was like, listen, the offers came in and they're pretty much like exactly the same. And what do you want to do? And I literally am going to go with the network that treated me just as human beings in the present moment when I was with them. I just felt like they were like nicer. They were both nice, but like one group was just like really like more kind of like they were looking me in the eye when they were talking to me. I felt like they really wanted to work with me. And the way networks work is those people who bought my show can all be gone in 3 months. And the other network would have given me the better chance. But I don't know any of that information in the future. Just in the present, I go by my mom's rule. I was like, these people seem like the people that, and maybe I'm wrong, but again, I can only go by my gut. I'm like, they seem like the people who would, treat people that they think they don't need with kindness. And I'm like, so I'll go with them. And I feel good about that decision where I had this opportunity like 8 years ago and I did all these things like this calculation will get this show. It was a sitcom for CBS. I was like, we'll go there because this is going to happen. And, all these things. And then it didn't go. It didn't get picked up. And I was like, oh man, I should have just went with like a gut thing. I should have made the decision in the present and not worried about the future because I thought all these calculations would get me to the answer in the future, and I was wrong.
But just like you ignored your dad's advice, how much higher would the other offer have had to be for you to go with the not as kind people? There's obviously a number, right?
Yeah, I guess there is a number. Well, I would say this.
Twice?
I would say this. If I felt that number, if we got to in success, would literally buy me like a year of freedom that I wouldn't have to do anything for money. I wouldn't have to do anything I didn't want to for money. I would take them. But if it was just,
10%.
No.
Yeah.
Because I'd be like, that's still not going to change my life, know? And one of them agreed to film in New York, one didn't. So for me, it's like, if you're filming in New York,
sure.
And I don't have to get on a plane. I mean, even if you tell me there's a less likely chance of success, because I know now the big lesson that I learned actually a really valuable lesson when I had the CBS sitcom pilot in 2016, and it didn't go. It gave a year of my life. My daughter was 1, and it was this whole thing. We shoot the pilot, it's like crazy, like amazing on the LA lot where CBS Radford, like this great. You know, Chaz Palminteri's playing my dad, Annie Potts playing my mom. It's like this whole thing. And I'm like, wow, like, you know, my family, I gave all this. And then what happened is I was on a plane, right? Coming from San Francisco back to New York. And it was the day that they were making the announcements on you shoot, if you don't know it, you shoot, they shoot 10 pilots, right? They're going to pick up 5 to go on the air that you as the consumer will see, right? So I see on my phone, an article comes out, CBS picks up for their fall lineup, and my show wasn't on it. So I text my manager. I'm like, damn, dude, like, I just saw it, like, whatever. And he was like, no. He was like, I was just going to call you. Yes, those 4 have been picked up for fall, but it's between your show and another show on which one is going to be the winter pickup. There's going to pick up one more show that's going to start in January, and it's between your show and another show that I think the show is about a talking dog. So I'm like, okay. So the plane is like taking off, like accelerating to like take off. And I was sitting in the front, and the first, the lady was like, the flight attendant was like, you need to put your phone away. Cause I'm like texting, whatever. She's like, put it in airplane mode, and then I'm like, all right, I'm, whatever. And then I'm about to, we're like literally like taking off, and I'm going to put in airplane and my fingers going like this. And a text comes from the top of my screen from my manager saying they went with the other show. Sorry. And I was like, oh shit. And then like I hit in airplane mode, and like my head went back into the headrest, and I just for like 2 hours was like in like this fog that has never happened since for me. But it was like this thing where I was like fully disconnected from reality, where I was like not even in my body, like what am I gonna do now? And then whatever, started to slowly get back into my body. I land, my family didn't know. I tell them, and I tell, they're like, oh, sad, whatever. And then I tell my 1-year-old daughter, I'm like, that big show that daddy was working on, like, it's not going to happen. And I'm sorry. And she goes, she was like, oh, so can we not go to the park then? And I was like, no, of course we can go to the park. She was like, oh, so then why are you saying you're sorry? Yeah. And I was like, oh, shit. Yeah, I was making this all about me. My daughter doesn't care at all. She's like, just push me in the swing. And then I learned that, it was never about the end result. It was always about, like my father would always say, it's not about the outcome. It's about the output. I want to see your output. I don't care if you win or lose. It's never about that. It's about what your effort, right? And I realized like the relationships yes, my pilot didn't get to air, but I still made those relationships. I still got those opportunities. I still was in the present every day getting this opportunity. And I always kind of regretted all these years of being like, I didn't enjoy that process as much.
It was outcome dependent.
Yes, where now I don't feel that way. Now I'm like, maybe it will only just be a pilot again. But now I'm like, oh, I'm getting like a second chance to be like, live this thing the right way now. Like enjoy these moments the right way, and understand maybe your show gets on the air, maybe it doesn't. It's not about that. It's about these possible relationships you're going to make, this kind of new thing to look forward to each day. That's what life's about.